Hi everyone, thanks for joining. It's great to have the opportunity to discuss with you today. The idea of this meetup is really to go through Apache NiFi from an Apache point of view, the open source project, discuss about what NiFi is, have a presentation, have a demo. I will try to do my best to cover as much as possible in the 2 hours we have. I could be talking about NiFi for many hours, so let's try to make this interactive. Please ask any question you want in the chat so that it can also drive the discussion and what I will be showing to you. I will be starting with a few slides just to introduce Apache NiFi, what this is about, and then I will go into the NiFi UI, show you how it looks, give you a 360 overview of the NiFi UI, how to build a flow, things like this. And then depending on how, the questions you are asking and so on, we can also look into the open source side of the project, how to get involved in the project, how to submit the pull request if you want to submit some changes, modifications, or build your own components in NiFi and provide this to the community. So I will try to go over all of this. As I said, it's like outside of the slides I prepared. This is all I didn't plan for anything. So I will just go along with the presentation and going through everything in NiFi. So feel free to ask your questions. I don't want to feel like I'm talking to myself. Use the chat if you want to ask questions. I will keep an eye on it and take the questions as they come in. So let's get started. Let me share my screen and let's start with a few slides. So hopefully you can see my screen. Let me just get the chat on my screen as well, just to make sure I keep track of your questions. Okay, cool. So, well, I've been introduced already, but very quickly. So I'm Pierre Villard. I'm a director of product management at Cloudera. I'm taking care of basically everything we are doing around NiFi and all of the NiFi friends. So NiFi registry, NiFi agents, edge flow manager, and so on. I won't be really talking about the edge management. Yes, I can go in slide mode. It's just I don't like let me do this. I don't like the transition, but it's fine. I will manage. Okay, so I won't be talking about the edge stuff today. I can mention it very quickly, but if I talk also about the edge stuff, we are going well over time. So I'm taking care of all of NiFi and NiFi friends at Cloudera. I'm involved in the Apache NiFi project for quite a while now. I'm a committer and PMC member for the Apache NiFi project. I will be talking about this, like the community aspects of the project, how you can get involved, how to become a committer if that's something you would like. And the steps to also be a PMC member. Yeah. Did someone ask a question? No. Okay. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat. I think it's better. I have the chat view on my screen, so I can take the questions as they come in. So yeah, involved in the Apache NiFi project for quite a while now. It's been 8 years. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub. I also have many blogs, many videos. I have a YouTube channel where I'm trying to post one video per week about use cases and things you can do with NiFi. I also used to do live Twitch, but well, I don't really have time anymore to do this. I will try to find something to get back to it in the future. Okay, a bit of history with NiFi, because sometimes people are forgetting about where it's coming from. They just think about the Apache side of the project, but initially NiFi, which is a short contraction for Niagara Files, has been created at the NSA in the US more than 70 years ago now. In 2014, it's been offered by the NSA to the Apache Software Foundation, and it was like any project that you give to the ASF. It's starting as what we call an incubator project, and then you have, let's say, a list of requirements to fulfill before you can be considered as an official top-level project within the Apache Software Foundation. So that's what NiFi did in July 2015. So actually just before I got involved in the project myself. But yeah, initially this project, this code, this software has been created by the NSA. You can imagine the kind of use cases it was used for, but really that's the history of NiFi. So it's a piece of software that has been used for a while now by many companies across many industries, many use cases, and so on. So, I mean, I can't give names for public references, but also the gap on like the big five in the IT, let's say, are also using NiFi at different levels. So it's really a project that is used in many companies, many verticals, for many use cases, and so on. There is a question about if there is a managed service of Apache NiFi provided by any of the cloud vendors. So officially speaking, not to my knowledge, because every cloud vendor, if we are talking about, well, let me take a step back. If we are just talking about AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, then they have, let's say, their own competitive solutions. Even though if you ask me, I don't think cloud vendors have anything like NiFi. They do have things where you have overlap in terms of features, but there is nothing like NiFi provided by cloud providers. However, Microsoft is providing some documentation and some resources around running NiFi on Azure. This is mainly related to the JEDI project that they got with the US government. So they do provide resources and content around NiFi. It's not a managed service, but that's an option. Obviously, if we take a step back and if you consider Cloudera, through all of the cloud vendors, all three major cloud vendors, we do provide solutions for Apache NiFi. So I can talk a bit about this. If you have questions around what Cloudera is providing in terms of NiFi service and all of the things we are providing around it, I'm happy to discuss about this. Actually, when I will be showing you NiFi, I will be using what we offer with NiFi on cloud vendors. Also, there is an offering with IBM. So if you are a user of IBM Cloud, there are options to run NiFi there. Okay, so what is NiFi used for? If we have to summarize what NiFi is about, it's really about moving data from A to B and making sure that while the data is moved from A to B, the data is transformed the way you need, is checked against schemas. You can make enrichments, you can make format conversions, and so on. So it's really about moving the data in the most efficient way from A to B, and that's it. That's really what NiFi is about. So you may think, okay, I have a use case. I need to move data from, I don't know, a database to a lakehouse. You may think, yeah, I don't need NiFi. This is overkill because I can use a bunch of scripts. I can deal with all of this. But the power of NiFi is that it can really provide a universal distribution system, and it can connect to anything with anything. So the idea is, for one use case, okay, NiFi may be overkill, but when you have many use cases in your, let's say, IT department or your company, NiFi can be considered as the gateway, the universal data distribution tool that you are going to use to get the data from your sources and make this data available to your destinations. This is really how NiFi should be considered. It's really a framework with a very large number of connectors to connect anything with anything. And NiFi has been designed to be very efficient for doing this, for both batch-oriented use cases, but also streaming use cases. If you have to deal with billions of events per second, this is something that NiFi can do. If you just want to move some data, some files from an SFTP server to an object store, this is also something you can do perfectly fine. So this is what NiFi is about. I often get the question about NiFi versus traditional ETL tool. So there is a huge overlap between NiFi and ETL, but NiFi is not an ETL. So there are things that ETLs can do that NiFi won't be able to do, and vice versa. So you should rather consider NiFi as an ELT. And if you have heavy processing to do on top of your data, then it's better to do this in the downstream systems where you are pushing your data. When I say heavy processing, what are the things I have in mind? So basically, I mean, I will be showing all of this when we get to the NiFi UI and the demonstration. But when data is moving within NiFi, you can make any transformation, any enrichment you want in your events. But if you have to, let's say, combine multiple data sets, multiple events together, this is where NiFi should not be used. So if you have massive joins to do between two data sets, windowing, aggregations, things like that, you have other solutions that can be used for this. Flink, for example, is a very good streaming engine to do this kind of transformations. So it really depends what you are doing, but some heavy transformations may be better delegated to the downstream systems where you are sending your data. And you would usually get more resources and power to do this in a more efficient way. So NiFi is really focusing on moving the data as fast as possible, and you can make any change, any improvements, any transformation on events that you are moving. So if you have, I don't know, like, if you have a file, a CSV file with a bunch of data, you can make any transformation you want in this CSV file. If you need to do some filtering, some enrichments, etc., you can do it. There is no issue. But if you are getting data from, let's say, an SFTP server, and you get two CSV files, and you want to do a join on a column with those two CSV files, that's not something you want to do in NiFi. There are ways to do it, but we do not recommend doing this in NiFi. If you have a streaming use case where you are, let's say, getting data from Kafka in a streaming way, so many events per second, and you are pushing this into, I don't know, Elasticsearch, for example, but you want to do some windowing aggregation of your events so that what you are pushing to Elastic is just, I don't know, outliers or aggregates of your data, then that's also something you don't really want to do in NiFi. You can do it, again, but there are tools that are better suited for this, because as soon as you are talking about window aggregation and streaming, there are questions about late arrival of data and so on. So you have tools that are very good at resolving those issues. And I was mentioning Flink before. I think this is, as of today, probably the best solution for those use cases. Okay, so back to the slides. NiFi is really about moving data. As I said, we have the NiFi agents. It's a low-weight version of the NiFi project. We have a C++ version. We have a Java version, and it's also used to, let's say, collect the data as close as possible from the sources. and send the data to the destinations you want. It can be NiFi to NiFi, it can be NiFi to NiFi, but the NiFi agents can also send the data directly to some destination you want, depending on your use cases. NiFi is really agnostic in terms of data formats, data sizes. We have users processing tens of gigs files with NiFi, so there is no issue with that. It can be binary, it can be semi-structured, structured, whatever. We absolutely don't care about this. So there is image processing done in NiFi by some users. You can also do, I don't know, OCR to extract some text from PDF and stuff like that. You can really do whatever you want. NiFi is completely agnostic around this. And in terms of volume of data that NiFi can manage, it's also unlimited. Like NiFi is scaling very well, both horizontally and vertically. So we did publish a blog post, I think 5 or 6 years ago, where we scaled NiFi to a size where NiFi was able to ingest billions of events per second, which is probably more than what you will ever require. Okay, so what's the problem that NiFi is trying to solve? So as I said before, if you have just one single use case, some people are going to say, well, NiFi is overkill. But the reality is that now in your companies where you are working, there are many heterogeneous systems that you have to connect together. So on the slides, you can see, so for example, you can have many log data sources with various formats, various protocols, and so on. You want to collect all of those logs for, I don't know, cybersecurity use cases, for example, and you want to send this somewhere. It can be an object store, it can be a database, can be many things. You also want to connect to on-prem resources like databases, SFTP servers, and stuff like that. This is very common. And maybe you want to send all of this to a data warehouse. You also want to connect to, let's say, business process services, so Salesforce, Shopify, Slack, whatever. I mean, all of the systems you can imagine used in your company, ERP, etc., like anything. And you have to connect all of this together. And let's be honest, I mean, if you look at those solutions, usually they are not very friendly about getting the data out of their system. I mean, if you look at solutions on this slide, I don't want to point fingers, but those solutions usually are trying to make sure that the data stays in. Like they are not making your life very easy to interconnect all of this together. So the goal of NiFi is really to be, as I said, like an universal data distribution system to connect all of this together. And NiFi is the gateway to acquire, transform, process, and then deliver the data to the systems you have to deal with. That's really what NiFi is about. So if you ask me, but obviously I'm biased, NiFi should be part of any architecture for any use case, because as I said, like you need to get data for your use case, and NiFi provides a very elegant way and scalable way to connect all of your sources. And the more use cases you have, the more NiFi makes sense, because you have this consistent way of managing all of your data pipelines, get the data from external sources and get the data where it needs to be. This is an old slide that we've used for a while now, but I will show you in the NiFi UI all of the processors we have and so on. So as I said, there are hundreds of components in NiFi, and I will get to the concept of components and what those are. But we have components to get data from sources, components to send data to destinations, and components to transform the data, make some transformations on top of it. So I don't know the exact number. We are adding new components every week. So this is something very active. And if you ask me, this is probably the easiest way to get involved in the Apache NiFi project, that's how I got started. I just created a few processors and I submitted a pull request to have those processors included in the project. That's the easiest way to get into the NiFi project. And then the more you get used to NiFi and the more you know about it, the easier it would be to also submit code changes for the NiFi framework. Okay, very quickly, I already kind of mentioned it, but we have this NiFi ecosystem, NiFi friends. All of this is available in different GitHub repositories. But like we have NiFi, that's what I will be spending most of my time on. We have NiFi agents. There is the Java version. There is the C++ version. There is the NiFi registry. NiFi registry, you can see it as a specialized Git system for NiFi, for what you are doing in NiFi, how you build your flows and so on. It's really helpful for anything around CI/CD, managing the work you are doing, versioning it, and so on. So when you get really into NiFi and you want to go to production and so on, well, usually you have multiple environments for NiFi. You have a dev environment, pre-prod, production, and you want to move the work you are doing from one environment to another, make some tests, and then push to production. NiFi registry is really the key to help with this. NiFi C2 server is a component for command and control with the NiFi agents. I won't be talking about this. And NiFi FDS is where we make available a bunch of UI UX related code that is reused across all of the components. We are trying to make all of this available easily for anyone to reuse. In terms of the community, so NiFi is a very active project. I actually this slide, I did a conference at the Apache ApacheCon in Europe 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And here on the right, you have the numbers that I shared during this this talk that I gave at the ApacheCon, and you can see how the NiFi project is growing. So we have a Slack channel. I will be showing this if you want to ask questions with the community, stay up to date with what's happening in the project. Joining the Slack channel is probably the easiest way. So I will be showing you how you can join it. We have over 2,600 people there, so it's very active. I can't keep track of all of the discussions happening there, so it's very active. And well, the team behind the NiFi project is also very responsive on this Slack channel. In terms of contributors, we almost doubled the number of contributors, so 450 contributors. So it means how many individuals committed code in NiFi. 60 committers. So committers, I can talk very quickly about the Apache Software Foundation, but in a project for the Apache, the ASF, you have a contributor. Basically, this is someone who contributed code that has been accepted and merged into the project. If you do this for long enough and you are involved in the community, you are helping other members, you are participating in reviewing the code submitted by other people and so on, after some time, you will be recognized as a valuable member of the community, and the PMC, the project management committee of the Apache NiFi project, will be offering you the opportunity to become a committer. Becoming a committer means that you have right access to the GitHub repository. So it means that now you can merge the code of someone else. And then if you do this for a while and you keep contributing to the project, you can be offered the opportunity to become a PMC. project management committee member. So PMC members, they have access to a private mailing list. It's to discuss things around organization with the ASF. With the ASF, we have to submit some reports about how healthy the project is. We can also discuss about who is going to be committers, who is going to be PMC, and so on. And the PMC members, when there is a vote to make a release or take a decision that is important for the project, PMC members have a veto right. So they can say, no, what is being discussed is not going to happen. Obviously, there is a discussion. We have to explain why. But usually in an Apache NiFi project, when we are about to make a release, there is a release candidate that people can download, build, and play with. And there is a vote, and people are asked to participate to this vote. And they can say, yes, the release looks good. I didn't find any issue. Please forward with the release. So when there is a vote, you can say, okay, I want to give a +1 to the release, and the project is going to be, the version is going to be released. But as I said, PMC members can give a -1, which is basically a no. You have to give reasons, but that's a right of PMC members. To be honest, there is not a huge difference between committers and PMC, but that's let's say the hierarchy. Not really a hierarchy, because there is no hierarchy in the community, but it's kind of the differences between the different roles you can have. Right now, the latest release is Apache NiFi 121. Just so you know, so now if you go to the GitHub repository and you look at the main branch, the main branch is now configured on NiFi 2.0. So we are actively working on NiFi 2.0 as we speak. A lot of things are going to change. A lot of amazing new features are going to be available with NiFi 2.0. If there are questions around this, please feel free to ask in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions about what's coming and what we are working on right now. But latest release right now is 121. There will be more releases on the 1.x release line, depending on how fast we are making progress, and also how close we get to the NiFi 2.0 release. We also provide a Docker image for running NiFi. This is probably the easiest way to get started with NiFi on your own laptop. So you can just do a Docker pull of the image, and in a few minutes you would get NiFi running on your laptop, and you can access the NiFi UI and start playing with it. It's a single node, it's not a cluster, but this is good enough to get started and start playing with it and build your first flows and start getting used to NiFi. Okay, so that's it for the slides. I will just get back here. I have too many screens. Okay, so that's really it for the slides. I hope it was clear. I'm going to switch over to the NiFi UI and try to give you an overview of NiFi and how to build flows. So let me switch over to here. I won't go into too many details, but this is Cloudera public cloud. So that's what we provide to our customers to use the Cloudera products across all three cloud providers, main cloud providers. So in my case, I started NiFi cluster, and I actually forgot to switch to the VPN. So that's something I completely forgot to do. I'm going to turn on the VPN. In theory, I should stay connected to the Zoom meeting. Just give me a minute. I forgot to do that, but our cluster is only available through VPN.
So before moving forward, if anybody has any question, please feel free to ask.
Yep. So,
Hi, Pierre. This is Randy from the Sydney office. I've got a quick question. A comment you made early on was, unlike ETL, this is ELT. Can you just elaborate why it's ELT in this case? I think I get it, but I just want to make sure what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yeah. So, as I said, like I get the question about NiFi versus ETL very often, and I'm always trying to explain that there are things that ETL provides that you can do in NiFi, but this is not really what NiFi has been designed for, and this is not a great idea. So usually that's what I mean. I mean, like instead of doing an ETL, so extract, transform in NiFi, and load into the downstream system, instead it's more like extract in NiFi, load into the downstream system, and do the transformation in the downstream system. Again, it highly depends on the transformations you want to do. So that's why I try to explain, but hopefully when I get to the NiFi UI and we start playing with it, it will be more clear. But in NiFi, you have this concept of flow file, which is basically, you can call it an event. But a flow file is something completely abstract. So it can represent a file, it can be a Kafka message, it can be many things depending on your use case and what you are doing. On a single flow file, on the content associated to a single flow file, you can do any transformation you want. Like NiFi has no issue. You can do any kind of transformation you want. As soon as you need to do transformations that are implying multiple flow files, multiple events, that's where NiFi may not be the best tool to do this. And again, unfortunately, I mean, it's a question where it always answers it depends. So it depends what you are doing. It depends what you want to do. There are ways to do window aggregations, but as I said, like if you have very strong requirements on dealing with late arrival data, there are other tools that are very well designed for this kind of use cases. And so like a traditional use case that people have with, let's say, ETL tool, traditional ones like Informatica, Talent, are very database oriented. And they are going to extract data from, I don't know, like two databases. So basically they would have two data sets, and within their ETL pipeline, they want to do a merge between those two data sets based on some join column. This is, I mean, again, this is something you can do in NiFi. There are ways to do it, but it may not be the most efficient solution for doing those kind of very heavy processing. So that's why I'm usually saying, for example, if you have two datasets to get in and merge, well, maybe it's better to just get your two datasets with NiFi, do the cleaning, filtering, enrichment you need on those two datasets separately. You push those into your downstream system. I don't know, like Hive or whatever, Snowflake, Databricks, whatever you are using. And you do the merge there, because those tools are better designed to do this. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does. There's only one point I want to add. I predominantly speak to prospects or new business. So if the comment is that they have an ETL tool, and we're positioning NiFi as part of our platform, what's the business benefit? I'm trying to make sure I get this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think, I mean, based on my own experience, NiFi is going to cover a much wider range of use cases. So I get this question many times. Like I get in front of customers, they tell me I have this tool, Talent, Informatica, you name it. and they ask me, well, can we replace it with NiFi? I mean, we can have this discussion, and my next question will be, yes, it's likely we can do it, but let's discuss about your ETL pipelines, because really depends on what you are doing. And maybe NiFi alone is not going to be enough. Maybe NiFi plus Flink is going to be the solution. I don't know. We really need to get into the ETL pipelines and really understand what the user is doing. But I think like this is not a use case oriented approach. This is more like I probably want to make some cost savings with my ETL tool that is very expensive and use NiFi instead, which is fine. I mean, this is a perfectly valid approach, but you need to think about NiFi as a way to, again, be the universal data distribution system for a much wider range of use cases. Like there are use cases like ETL have never been designed for. Like if you really look into very streaming use cases, ETL tools are not really good at this. So NiFi, and that's what I try to really insist on. NiFi is awesome because it can deal with all of the use cases you can think of. I can see a range of use cases across the customers we have at Cloudera. I mean, we have near 1,000 customers for NiFi across all industries, all verticals, and there is a very wide range of use cases. So that's why I think NiFi. I'm not saying to anyone you should get rid of your ETL system, but I think that ETL tools in the companies are now used for things where, I mean, it's not the best solution. For things that are simple, that are just about moving data around, developing an ETL pipeline is overkill, and something like NiFi will be much more easier. So you will get a better ROI in terms of development. It will be much more efficient, much more cost effective. But again, when someone is coming to me and saying, okay, I want to get rid of talent, can NiFi replace it? My answer is most likely, but maybe it can replace it for 95%, because for 5% of your use cases, talent is doing something where talent is really good at. And in that case, for those 5%, maybe we need to consider something like Flink, or, as I said, do the processing into the downstream system instead of doing it in the ETL pipeline.
Got it. Because I'm assuming because I'm having that exact conversation with the prospect and an SC in Australia. So I think to your point, I think number one is reducing the cost associated with the ETL solution they use. And I think second, if the organization is growing, so will the use cases. That complexity is where NiFi will help. So I think I'm assuming that I should be having that. I might pick your brain later offline at some point here.
Sure. Yeah, but that's definitely it. For me, really, the more use cases you have, the more value you will get with NiFi. I sometimes have very interesting discussions with a customer. They just start with NiFi and they use NiFi for one single use case, and it works well. But after some time, they are going to say, well, we are not going to keep using NiFi because what NiFi is doing can be done with a shell script. And I mean, yes, that's true. But do you want to have like a 1,000 shell scripts dealing with your data pipeline and leave it running somewhere? And in 1 year, when the guy who wrote the script is no longer here, you have no idea how to manage this. And when you unload more use cases, you get a bunch of scripts, and it's becoming a complete nightmare. So yeah, the more use cases you have, the more value you get with NiFi, for sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Pierre.
Yeah, sure. So I'm connecting to the VPN now. So hopefully I stay online. Usually it's working perfectly fine. Maybe it's going to break for just 1 second, but should be fine. Okay, I'm on the VPN. Hopefully you can still hear me. You can still see my screen. So here, as I said, this is Cloudera Public Cloud. This is what we provide to customers for running Cloudera products on all 3 cloud providers. Here, I just started an environment yesterday. It's running on AWS, and I have a NiFi cluster. I also started a Kafka cluster and Flink cluster. I don't think we will have time to play with those, but we'll see, just in case they are here. So I will get to the NiFi UI. So all of what you see here is what we provide at Cloudera around NiFi to make your life easier when you use NiFi. We also have like an on-prem version if you are not running in the cloud, obviously. And we do provide this integration to make your life easier about running, deploying clusters, and so on. So I'm in the NiFi UI. If you start NiFi, like if you go download the Docker image and you start NiFi and you access the UI, that's what you will see. The only difference is that here, this is a cluster of 3 nodes. Obviously, if you start just a single node, it will be not showing this part here. And here you have my name, because everything is automatically configured for you to use your identity provider and SSO and so on. If you download NiFi, the open source version, and you start it without changing anything in the configuration, we generate a random username and password that you can use to access the NiFi UI. So instead of my name here, you will see some random value. And actually, before I give you a tour of the NiFi UI, let me switch to the GitHub repository for the Apache NiFi project. So, I mean, obviously, as I said, if you want to get involved in the NiFi project and maybe contribute to the project, that's where you should be starting. So here with the code, you can download the code. If you do want to make contribution, usually the first step to make contribution to the code is to create a fork to your own repository, your own GitHub account. So you will start with a fork, and then on your laptop, you would check out your fork so that you can create a branch, make your changes, and then submit a pull request back to the Apache NiFi project. So lots of code. I won't go into the details of this because that's a lot of information, but you have some details. But here, there is good information about getting started. So this getting started is if you want to get started from code. So it's really, you check out the code, you build NiFi from the code, and you get started. You can also just download the convenience binary that we make available on the Apache NiFi project. So if we go on the Apache NiFi project and you go to downloads, we also provide already the binaries, and you can just get started with the Apache NiFi binary if you want. You just unzip it, and then you can start with things here. So it's very easy. You go into the directory nifi.sh start. You wait a bit, and as I said, in the logs, so you have a command here to get the generated username and password. In the logs, you will see the username and password we generated, so that you can access the UI in a secure way with the username and password. The reasons, that's something that we did quite well, I guess something like 2 years ago now. Initially, NiFi was, by default, NiFi was completely open. It was running on HTTP, no authentication, no username, password, but we did see a lot of people deploying NiFi in a completely unsecure way and completely open to the internet. And we saw a lot of people accessing those NiFi instances and running custom code, doing some mining, crypto, and so on. We said, okay, let's make HTTPS the default. So now, by default, when you start NiFi, this is completely secured with key store, trust store, TLS certificates, and so on. and we have a username password that is generated so that you can access the UI. You can also, if you don't like the random username and password that we generated, you can use these commands to set the username and password. This approach is just going giving you one user, so it's not something for production. It's just to get started and use it. And then the UI will be running on the ports 8443, and that's how you can access NiFi UI. So if you want to get started, that's it. Very quickly, since I am on this page, I mentioned before there is a Slack channel. Here, if you click here, you have the link to access the Slack channel. So you can click on this link, and this will get you to a sign-up page. So here, you can continue with Google for SSO. You can also here sign in if you already have a Slack account. It's misleading. Like, you don't need an apache.org email address to access the Slack channel. So just something I wanted to mention. And you get an apache.org email address only if you are a committer for one of the ASF projects. Okay, something else that I wanted to mention is the NiFi Jira. So everything we are doing in NiFi is tracked in this Jira project. So if you go at this address, issues.apache.org/Jira, you will get on the Jira for the ASF. You have all of the projects there. You can select then the projects you want to see, and you can look at the issues for specific projects. Okay. NiFi, you can see that we have multiple projects depending on what you want to work on. But if you go on the Apache NiFi project, that's how you get to the list of issues we have with NiFi. So that's also actually a way to get started with NiFi. If you want to start contributing to NiFi, a good way is looking at the issues, maybe find some bug, and maybe there is something that you are familiar with and that you want to look into, and maybe submit a pull request and a code change. If you don't see something that is already tracked and that you want to contribute, like building new processors, you have to get yourself an account. So you can click here, self sign up page to request an account. The community is in charge of approving your request. Usually we do it in the next couple of hours. There is always someone checking the requests. And once you have your Jira account, you can create Jiras. But anything you do needs to be to a Jira. So that's actually something I want to mention very quickly. But when you open a pull request, you need to reference a NiFi number. As you can see, for all of the open pull requests, you have a NiFi number. And actually, if we look into a pull request, there is a list of, let's say, requirements, things to check before opening a pull request. So there is a NiFi Jira issue that you created. The pull request has the right title and is starting with the reference to the Jira number. There is a commit message. So the commit message is also here, including the Jira number, etc., etc. Of course, you make sure that NiFi is building correctly. You added unit testing, blah, 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 blah. Anything that is related to your contribution. And then when there is a pull request, well, usually there is interaction and there is a back and forth to get the pull request in a shape that is good enough to get things merged. So like if you have questions on how to get started and contributing to NiFi, please ask me. If we have time, not sure we will have, but if we have time, I can go through the step of filing a pull request. There are always things to do, so I can easily find something for which I can file a pull request. Okay, let me go back to the NiFi UI. Okay, so that's the NiFi UI when you get started. There is nothing in NiFi. This is just the UI. And I will give you a tour and we will start building just 1 or 2 flows very quickly. And I will try to explain as many things as I can. So that's the UI. So this is the canvas on which we are working on. And that's where you can drag and drop components and start building your NiFi flows. So let's get started with the top bar here. So here you have the different components that you can play with in NiFi. So you have processor, which is really well the main component in NiFi. This is the logical piece in your flow that is going to be in charge of doing something. So we have processors in charge of acquiring data from sources, processors to transform the data, and processors to send the data somewhere. Really like ETL mindset. You have input port, output port. It's more like to connect multiple flows together or sending data from NiFi to a NiFi instance, a NiFi cluster to another NiFi cluster. I won't be really talking too much about this. I would say it's more for more advanced use cases. Process group is very important. That's a way to organize your work in the NiFi UI. If you think about a file system, process groups are like directories. So this is really my first recommendation. Anytime you get started with NiFi and you want to build a new use case, a new flow, just drag and drop a process group. This is kind of, it's kind of you creating a dedicated workspace for your use case. So I would say my use case 1, I give it a name and that's it. And this is going to be added on the UI. And here, this is my process group. And if I double click, I can go into my process group. And this is a fresh new where there is nothing and I can get started. And here at the bottom, you can see that you can reference where you are currently located. And I can go back to the top level, what we call the root process group, and so on. So this is really important. This is a way to organize your work. And usually very large users of NiFi, they have many levels of let's say, embedded process groups to organize all of this. So what I see usually is I'm going to have a process group for, I don't know, HR related use cases. I'm going to have a process group for cybersec related use cases and so on. And then within the HR process group, I'm going to have a process group for, I don't know, team A. Maybe there is another team that is working on different use cases, so team B. And then within those process group, I will have use case 1, team A. You can give any name you want, but that's how you can see you can have like a hierarchy and organize all of the work you have in NiFi. So that's important. And NiFi provides a very fine-grained authorization framework to define authorizations and policies for all of those components. So you can make sure that a given user that is working with the team A HR can only access this process group and the use cases here, and they can't see anything else. So with NiFi, and actually this is something we want to simplify in the next releases of NiFi, NiFi 2.0 and NiFi 3.0, we want to make it a bit more easier, because right now NiFi is providing, like, you have 100% control over the NiFi policies and how fine-grained your policies and authorizations can be. And sometimes, well, because we support any possible scenario, this is making the code very complicated. And based on our own experience and what we see with users of NiFi, the level of granularity that we provide is not required by anyone. And we are just making our life more difficult than required in the code. So in the future, we will be making things a bit easier. That's just a comment. But here you can manage the policies. So you can define who has access to what. So here, those are what we call access policies. So really, who can access the UI, who can make some configuration at the NiFi level. But then you can define, as I said, policies on dedicated process groups. So here, for this process group, you could look into this one and manage the policies for accessing this process group specifically. So who is able to view, who is able to make modifications, who is able to operate. So those are very important distinctions, because, for example, if you have your flow in production, maybe you want to give only read access to a lot of people and write access to just a few people. Modify the component means you can change the flow. Operate means start, stop the flow. So same story, like we do see a lot of users where changing something in production is not an option. The only thing you can do in production is start, stop the flow, so that if there is an issue, you can interact with it. Really depends on how you want to manage your policies. But as I said, we cover any use case, any situation you can think of. So process group, it's really a way to split up your work and organize everything you are doing. Remote process group is a way to connect NiFi with another NiFi instance. So we have many users that have NiFi on different, let's say, locations, factories, and they want to collect data locally to the factories and send this data to a central location. So they deploy NiFi everywhere, and you can have this way NiFi to NiFi communication. Using this remote process group is taking care of a lot of things for you. We manage the scaling, the load balancing, things like that. You can define things like priorities. If some data needs to be transferred with a higher priority, we can also manage compression and so on and so on. So remote process group, really NiFi to NiFi communication, also NiFi to NiFi communication. Funnel is a way to combine together the output of multiple processors together. So if I drag and drop processors, I will get back to funnel a bit later, but that's a way to combine, let's say, multiple sources into the rest of the flow. Templates is something that is going away, so I won't be talking a lot about this. I will actually explain a few other things. Templates, the concept of template is going away in NiFi 2.0. And then label is just a way for you to add some custom texts on the NiFi UI to add like comments to your code. It's like adding comments so that you can explain what the flow is doing and adding some information and so on. So let's go into my use case 1 and start building a flow. So the first step is to drag and drop a processor. You can see here we provide a very large number of processors. We have other components in NiFi. That's why I'm saying that actually it's more like 500 plus components. But for processors only, it's, I mean, we have this number right now. So, well, honestly, I mean, I think we provide a very large list of components. If there are things you want to interact with that you feel like it's not available in NiFi, please reach out, please let me know. We are always happy to build new components, new processors, and to extend the capabilities in NiFi. But yeah, honestly, I mean, you should find your happiness with all of the things we provide. So if we look at AWS, for example, we provide a bunch of processors to interact with the let's say, traditional AWS managed services. If we look at database stuff, so it would be everything we are doing with databases is over gDBC. So you have a bunch of processors to interact with, let's say, databases. We have Hive dedicated components, generic processors to interact with databases over gDBC. What else? If you look at Azure, same story. If you look at Google, same story, etc., etc. So really depends what you want to do. MongoDB, Elasticsearch. We, as I said, we interact with everything. We also have very generic processors. So if you need to interact with gRPC endpoints, HTTP endpoints, we also provide those very generic processors that have a lot of configuration, but you can basically do anything you want with those. And we also have a scripted processor where you can write your own code directly in the NiFi UI, assuming that you are using one of the languages we support. There is Lua, Python, Clojure, Groovy, languages that can be compiled within the JVM. And we also provide processors where you can execute local commands on the host where NiFi is running. So if you have very specific scripts that you already built that you want NiFi to execute, that's also something you can do. Just as a quick note, you can see here there is a small icon on the left for some of the components. Those are what we call restricted components. You can specify dedicated permissions on those components. We are saying those components are restricted because they provide capabilities that's like interacting with the file system of the host. So technically speaking, someone that is, well, not really nice could do bad things. So there are ways to lock out the use of those components if this is something you don't want to use. Okay. Let me think about a use case we can build. So we can get started with, okay, I froze. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. I don't know, my laptop just restarted without asking me. So I actually don't know what I was saying at the time. It's just froze. So if someone can tell me what I was saying at the time you lost me.
I think you were talking about sharing some use case. Okay. If anyone has some question, I think we can just yes.
Yeah, my laptop is finishing to restart. So if you have questions, now is a good time. I need to reconnect to a few things. So feel free to ask questions. I'm getting back to everything as soon as possible. Sorry about that. And this is, I guess, a reminder that I shouldn't keep my laptop always running 24/7.
You mentioned that the templates are going away in next release, right? So what's the alternative for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me just so I mean, while I'm reconnecting to everything again, really sorry about this. So yes, so in NiFi 2.0, we are removing completely the concept of templates. The reason is that those templates are based on an XML description of the flow, which is coming with a lot of limitations and issues. So I'm sharing again my screen. So yeah, so the concept of template is going away. So just for those who are not aware about what a template is, so when you have a process group, here you can say create template, and this is going to create a template out of it. And then you can download it, and this is an XML file. This is kind of okay, and you can move those XML files from one NiFi instance to another, but it has a lot of limitations, and we are overall in NiFi, we are moving away from the XML representation of anything that is happening in NiFi. So actually, if you start using the latest releases of NiFi, you will see that now you have both flow.xml.gz and flow.json.gz files on the NiFi post that are containing the definition of everything that you have on your canvas. We are completely moving away from XML representations and going only to JSON definitions. So actually, instead of doing create template, that is going to go away also, you can use download for definition. And this is going to download a JSON version of your process group. And you can also do it the other way around, like process group, you can give here your JSON file. So that's the alternative. It's already available, and we are just removing completely the template. Actually, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was talking about the other way. Like if someone has already saved the template and wants to load it in the newer version, how is that supported on?
Yeah, so NiFi 2.0 is not around the corner. Like it will be, I think the first version of NiFi 2.0 is probably going to be something like around September, and it will be an alpha release. And I would expect the first GA release of NiFi 2.0 around the end of this year. When we get to the GA release, we will be providing tooling so that all of the users with the existing XML templates can be converted and everything is taken care of for you. So you don't have to worry about this. So everything will be very easy for you to convert whatever XML templates you have already into the JSON versions so that you can use those versions instead. Also, something just to mention very quickly, because that's an issue we've seen with a lot of customers. When you create an XML template, so let's say I create a template here, this is my template, and the template has been created. And now here, if I go in templates, this is kind of my library of templates, and I can see it here. The issue, and this is actually something that many users are facing with NiFi, those templates are now part of the definition of the flow, and all of this is held in memory of NiFi. So we do see users of NiFi that have tens of thousands of components in their flows. Like you can, in NiFi, technically speaking, there is no limitation. You can have as many components as you want. But the more components you have, the more resources you may require, especially in terms of memory, because a lot of information is going to be held in memory. The issue is that if you create very large flows, thousands of components, thousands of processors, and you create templates out of those very large flows, it's going to add a lot of pressure on the memory of NiFi. This is something we are completely removing when we move to JSON, because basically, instead of having this library of templates, what we will be advocating for is to use the NiFi registry. And so instead of saying, so you will have basically two options. You could say, okay, I want to download my flow definition as a JSON file. And when you get to a new NiFi cluster, you can just drag and drop and here upload the JSON file. And that's fine. If you don't want to use the NiFi registry, you can do this. And this provides the same, let's say, capabilities as what you had with templates. Now, our recommendation is obviously to use the NiFi registry, because a lot of, let's say, thoughts and software engineering have been put into this component. And instead, you could say, okay, for my use case, I want to start version control. And here, you can select your NiFi registry, the bucket, so kind of the directory where you want to store your flow, and you could say, okay, this is my use case. My use case is doing something. I don't know yet. And initial version. As I said, it's like a Git commit. And now you can see here, you can see here that now your flow is versioned in the NiFi registry. And the NiFi registry allows you to version and version control all of the work you are doing. And now if I want to get this here, I could say import from registry, and I could say, okay, I want the flow of my use case, and I want the first version, and I can import it, and it's available here. That's a better way of managing all of this, because you are not storing all of the information around your templates. We don't like the word template anymore. We use flow definition. So you don't have to put pressure on NiFi with all of those flow definitions that you may build and use in your NiFi instances. I don't know. Are you already using NiFi registry by any chance?
Yeah. I'm from Cloudera, so yeah. In a few of the testing, like we're using that. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So clearly, once we remove the XML templates completely, we will be advocating for using more and more the NiFi registry, which is really the best way to manage, especially in a multi-tenant cluster, like when you have NiFi used in a very multi-tenant way with many different teams, many different group of people. Using the NiFi registry is for me, I mean, from my point of view, is completely mandatory if you want to work properly. So yeah, that's really what we will be advocating for.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So actually, let me just get the chat view again here. So if you have questions, you can use the chat if you want. So yeah, so let me go back to my use case one, and I was mentioning all of the processors we had. I don't know exactly when I got disconnected, but I just want to get started with a basic use case. So usually when you just want to generate some random data and play with NiFi, generate flow file is the processor you are going to use. This is not something you will use in production, but this is basically a processor to do load testing and generate a lot of data very quickly. And it's very helpful when you are building a flow. This processor is just about generating data, and you can define the data you want to generate. So you can see it looks a bit different from a process group. We have some metrics about how much data is being generated, processed, and so on. And if I do something like convert records, I will be talking about records. Now you have those two processors. Convert record is basically if you want to switch from one format to another, you will use this convert record processor. And you can connect the two together. You can select which relationship should be used. In this case, generate flow file has only one. And here, it's how you can build your flow. So here you have a processor, you can see it stopped, and you can start generating data. And I connected it to a convert record processor, which is right now showing as invalid because some configuration is required before it can be valid. So that's how you get drag and drop components, and you can build your flow, and you can build things that are very advanced and complex. If we look at the configuration, so if you double click on the processor, you can go into the configuration of the component. We have a bunch of things. We have about 40 minutes left, so I won't go into too many technical details. Again, if there are questions, please ask me. But basically, you can change the name, you can change a few things, how the processor, the component is going to be scheduled. So this is important. You can use timer driven, which means like run whenever you can. You can also use cron driven if you want to execute a flow, I don't know, every day at 1 a.m. or every 6 hours or whatever. This is how you can define how your flows get executed. So it's really important. You also have the execution. So you can define, for some use cases, you don't want to have your use case running on all the nodes of the NiFi cluster. So in this case, you have this concept of primary node, which is a node that is getting elected when the NiFi cluster is starting. And this node will be considered as the primary node. And you can define a flow for running only on the primary node if it makes sense. Each processor will have a bunch of configurations. So you can see all of the properties here, and you can configure your processors based on your needs and depending on what you want to do. So in this case, as I said, this is a processor that is just for generating data. You can generate, I want to generate 100K of data as text. You can provide custom text if you want to provide your own text, but here it's going to be just random. Relationship, it's how you can define the connections between one component to another. The generate flow file has only a success relationship, so I won't be talking too much about this here, but I will get back to this in the next processor. And then comments, it's a way for you to add some notes. Comments, in case you are working, let's say multiple people are working together on the same flow, this is useful to share some notes, explanations about what you did, why you configure the component like this, and so on. If I add a comment here, this is something that would be showing here. So this is a good way to, let's say, annotate your flow if you want to add some information. As I said before, you can also add a label here, and I will say, okay, here I'm just generating random data. So that's a way for you to add some notes to your flow and explain what you are doing. So once we have our processor and it's configured this way, you can right click on the component and you can start it if you want. There is the run once option, which is really nice. So actually, let me take a pause here. By default, and that's a huge difference with the ETL tools. Usually when you design an ETL pipeline in tools like StreamSets, Talent, Informatica, you build your pipeline, and your pipeline becomes like, let's say, a single unit of processing that you push somewhere on some running engine. It can be Spark, it can be something else, and this is going to run, and your pipeline is running, and that's it. In NiFi, every component can be managed individually. That's a huge difference with ETL that makes NiFi very interesting and much easier to operate, in my opinion. So you can start things individually, you can stop components, you can make modification while the flow is still running and data is still being processed by NiFi. This is way more flexible in terms of operations. The pipeline, the full data flow is not a single unit of processing that you are pushing onto let's say, a runtime, like Spark or, I don't know, Google Data Proc or whatever, depending on what you are using. Each component has its own life cycle. So you can really manage things and change things while they are running. And by default, when you have a NiFi flow, when you start it, it's always running. So NiFi, and that's where sometimes there is a bit of confusion. NiFi doesn't really have this concept of jobs. So it's not like you are going to say, okay, execute this once a day and give me the results of the execution. It's not how it's working. You can say, okay, in my generate flow file, I go in the configuration and I want to schedule it once a day. So here I could say run it every 24 hours. And here, if I start, the processor, as you can see, will always be running. But the next execution of this processor will be in 24 hours. We generated data, so you can see it's 3 files because I have a cluster of 3 nodes. So each node executed the processor, but the next execution will be in 24 hours based on the scheduling that you define. But the processor itself is running. And if you want to make modifications, you have to stop, and then you can go into the configuration, make changes, and so on. By default, most of the components, they are configured with 0 second, which means run as fast as you can. And if I start the component, as you can see, it's going to generate a lot of data. And we have this concept of back pressure, which is a way for self-preserving the system. We are saying that when you reach some limits in terms of accumulating data in a connection, there will be back pressure, which means that the upstream components has to stop so that the downstream components in your flow have the time to process the data. This is to make sure that you are not accumulating too much data in flight in NiFi, and you are self-preserving the system. This is a very important concept, and you can change the back pressure settings, but usually keeping the defaults, it's a very good idea. When you start playing with the back pressure, you need to really think about what it means and what are the implications in terms of memory consumptions, resources, and so on. But here, I started my processor. It generated gigs of data very quickly. We can see, for example, what's in this queue. So here we have a bunch of what we call flow file, which is really the single unit in NiFi for an event. And we said to the generate flow file processor, we said, please generate 100K random data. So if we look at one of those flow files, for example, it's going to load the data. And we can see that it generated, well, garbage, basically, but this is what the processor has generated for us. Okay, and we can see here all of the data. We can download the file if we want. We can see the content. We can do many things. This is a good transition to diving into this concept of flow file. So flow file, as I said, is an event. It's what's the single unit of processing that we are moving into an NiFi flow. A flow file is made of 2 parts. You have what we call the flow file attributes. So basically the metadata associated to your flow file, and you have the flow file content, which is the actual payload. Both are making the flow file, and both are equally important. Using the attribute is very useful to make some routing decisions in your flow, some filtering on the data, but also to do some auditing and tracking about what's happening. All of what's happening on a flow file going through NiFi at a given point in time is going to generate what we call provenance data. So basically NiFi has a very powerful system which is going to audit and give you the lineage of everything that is happening on the data while it's going through NiFi. So here you can, for example, for a given flow file, you can access the provenance. You can see all of the events that happened on this data. So for example, here, the data has been created by the generate flow file, and there was a download action. This is when I opened the content to see what was inside the flow file. So actually, a user actually looking into the data is an event, and we want to track that someone was looking into the data, because maybe NiFi is used to move very sensitive data, and someone looking into the data should not be something that is allowed. So you can block it, but you can also audit it in case it's happening. And we provide lineage. So there is a way where you can see very like step by step how data is transformed and converted from the time it's getting in to the time it's going out. So here, obviously, it's a very basic flow, but I will switch to something else a bit later and show you a more complex flow. I'm trying to cover as many concepts as possible with NiFi. Feel free to ask questions if there are things that are not clear or if all of this is extremely straightforward and you want to discuss about something else. Something that is important in NiFi that has been around for many years now, but I keep talking about it because this is extremely important. In NiFi, we have this concept of record. And we have a bunch of processors that are record aware, record oriented, where you can leverage this records, let's say API in NiFi. So a records is basically a way for you to say to NiFi, the data that is coming in is in a structured format and has a given schema. And this is a way for NiFi to understand what is the format of the data, infer the schema or know the schema that you are expecting, and do some very powerful conversions on top of the data. So just to give you an example here, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to empty the queue and delete all of the data here. And instead of generating random data here, I'm just going to provide some custom text here, and I'm going to say some JSON. So fields value, and we'll say this is a string. So very basic JSON, and here application JSON. And here in the convert records, I will be able to say now, okay, I'm going to define what we call a reader, and that's where you can say, okay, NiFi, the data that is coming, use this reader because I know that the data that is coming in is JSON. So here you can create a new reader, and this is introducing the concept of what we call controller services in NiFi. This is a new type of component. A controller service is a way to abstract something in your NiFi flow that you are likely going to reuse many times in many places. And readers, writers, obviously are controller services because when you are processing some data that is JSON or Avro or CSV or XML, whatever, the information that you provide to NiFi so that it's able to read the data is probably something you want to reuse across multiple places. So this is a way to abstract some pieces of configuration and reuse this configuration across many processors. That's a way for you to not have to duplicate the same information many times. So we provide a bunch of readers, and we also provide a scripted reader if you want to code your own reader. So as you can see, a lot of things. Some are for very specific business use cases. For example, SN1, so it's more like for telco, IPFix for very specific, let's say, logs of network devices, Cisco emblem for, well, Cisco devices. So we have a lot of readers for cybersecurity oriented use cases, but in my case, I'm just going to use the JSON reader. So here, I'm just going to change the name for JSON reader. And here I can go into my controller service and I can provide some configuration. So here it's another view where you can manage the controller services and the things that are going to be reused across multiple places in your flow. And here you have a bunch of configuration that is available. So as I said, since we know it's structured data, you can specify the schema that should be used. By default, NiFi provides a way to infer the schema. So we will be looking at the data and we will say, okay, based on the data and based on what I see, this is the schema that is applied on your data. Inferring schema is great when you are developing because you don't have to worry about the schema, you don't have to define it. But at the same time, this is also an expensive operation because we have to look through the data to understand what is the likely schema that you want to use. So infer schema is great when you are developing, but well, if you get more serious about your use case and you want to go into production, you probably want to specify the schema that should be used on top of your data. You have multiple options. You can just give your schema directly in NiFi. or you can use the schema registry that we provide at Cloudera. You can also use the schema registry of Confluence. There are many options. So in this case, I'm just going to use infer schema and not do anything else. So I will just use the defaults. I'm going to start this reader and go back to my convert record processor. And here, let's say I want to convert this data into another format. And here we have this concept of writer. So it's just what is going very well with the reader. You have the reader to say to NiFi, I want to read this data this way. And the writer, which is a way for you to say, okay, I want to output the data according to this specification. So it's a very easy way to just convert data. So for example, here, I'm going to say I want to write in Avro. So I'm going to say Avro. Here, same story. I can go into the configuration. And I will just say embed the Avro schema that you inherited from the reader and just embed it into the Avro payload. So the default is what I want in this case. I don't want to do anything crazy. I start this, and now let's just add a random processor after, and let's connect things. So here we have two relationships. So there is the success one for successful transformation of the data. And maybe I want to have some specific processing for the failure in case something wrong is happening, like the data that I'm receiving is not valid JSON. And maybe I want to send an email when there is some bad data. So I could say here for the failure relationship, let's send an email notification. Now you can see that everything is configured, so I can actually start the processor if I want. So here I will start run once, to just generate one profile per node. And if we look at the data, here we can see that we have our JSON. So it's formatted, we can display it nicely, like if it's like you can beautify the JSON if you want, so that it's easier to read. And then here, I'm going to start the convert record, and it's going to convert the record. And we can see here, we had 60 bytes in, and we have about, 10 times more out, because the Avro payload is going to embed the schema. So if we look here at the data, this is going to be some binary data, but here you can see that at the beginning, you have the schema that has been added here, and then you have the binary data for your Avro data. But here you can say formatted, and NiFi is going to automatically apply the schema and look at the data. So you can still see the content, even though it's binary Avro data. So that's a very straightforward way to converting data from one format to another. This is used a lot. Now, what happens if there is a failure? Because the data is not JSON. So in that case, let me generate some data that is not valid JSON. And here, if I run once, this is going to generate what we call a built-in. So built-in is the alerting notification system in NiFi. So whenever there is something wrong happening, a processor would emit a built-in, and you can have specific handling for those built-ins for monitoring, alerting, and so on. You can have the details. So here we are saying, okay, we didn't had the right character at the end, so it's not a valid JSON. So we are sending all of this to failure, and then I could configure my put email processor to send a notification over email if I want. Something that is powerful and that is quite recent is that in the processor, you can specify the retry. So in case there is a failure, you may want to retry things. So obviously it depends on the use case. In this example with bad data, even if you retry, the data is not going to change. It's always going to be bad. But if you have a processor that is interacting with another system, like I don't know, like a put HDFS processor to send data into HDFS, or put S3 processor to send data into AWS S3, maybe there is a network failure and maybe you want to retry before considering the attempt as a real failure. So here you have this system of retry, and we have this exponential backoff, so that we are going to retry up to 10 times, and exponential backoff will be up to 10 minutes. So this is a way in the framework to have NiFi retry sending the data to another system, or execute the processing while managing failures. So that's very important. That's something that we added in NiFi 1.15, I would say, something like this. This is a very nice concept to manage failures. Okay, so now I want to go one step further about those records processors. A very powerful processor is the query record processor, which is actually allowing you to build SQL streaming in NiFi. So here, instead of this, I'm going to move my connection here, and well, we need to configure the processor. So here, let me go a bit further here and say, I don't want to just generate one JSON payload. I want to have actually multiple records. So I'm going to say, to do very quickly something like this. And here I'm generating an array of records where I have multiple JSON payloads. So here I would say value 1, value 2, let's say value 3. So here I'm generating more data, and the query record processor is a way for you to apply SQL on top of your data. So I'm going to say JSON row same, and here you can add a query. So I will say filtering on value. And here I can write my SQL. So I can say select star from my flow file, where fields like value here. So basically I'm saying I just want to get the records where the fields has the value. And if I do this and connect here, and I have the specific SQL query I want to execute, I will get the data. Here it's saying that I still have two relationships to define, and here I don't really care, so I can say terminate. It means that if some data is going into those relationships, I give the permission to NiFi to drop this data because I don't care anymore. So now I can run once here, and I can start here. And so this is executing the query on top of my data. So now, if we look at the input here, sorry, the output here, we can see that we only got two records left because the other ones are not matching the query. And if we look here at the provenance, we can see the lineage. So actually, we can start doing something a bit more nice. So we have the create, the generate flow file that's creating the data, and then we have the query. Here we have the query record processor that is being executed. Some data is dropped. That's the data that is not matching my query. And then we have the routing and then the download when I was looking at the content. So as you can see, we can start doing nice things with the lineage and see really cool things. So for example, here, I could say view details, and I can see the contents before and after. So this is not the interesting part, actually. This is the query record, sorry, here. So here we have I want to show you the fact that we can see before and after. So here we have the before with all of my JSON records. And then after the query record, here we can see the after. So the lineage is a very powerful concept in NiFi that you can use for auditing and tracking and so on. So that's something you should really leverage. Also, something that is really important around provenance is that you can use it to replay events that are no longer in NiFi. So just to take a step back, in NiFi, when the data is going through, is flying in flight in NiFi, all of the payload is stored in what we call the content repository. But when the data is out of the system, because you sent it to the destination, we are not removing the data from the content repository. We are marking the data as archived. And according to how you configure NiFi and so on, you can keep archive for like a given duration, depending on how much storage you want to have and so on. This is important because when the data is still available as archived, you can tell NiFi, okay, please replay the events because what I did was wrong and I want to reuse the data. So for example, here, if I stop this and I remove all of the content, so I empty all queues. So you can see here, all of the data has been removed. I don't have data anymore here. I could go to this processor and say, okay, yesterday something wrong happened on my data. So I could say, okay, let's view data provenance. So all of what happened on this specific processor. So you would have the history. You can make some specific search and so on. And you could say, okay, this specific event that I dropped for no reason, I want to replay it. So you could go in the content and you can see here that we can replay it because the content is still available in the content repository. So you can click replay, and this is actually telling NiFi, please re-inject my data. And the data is now available again here. So this is something also very powerful and very useful in NiFi when you want to replay some specific data sets that caused issues, or maybe the flow was not exactly as you wanted and you want to make some modifications and then replay the events. So that's a very nice way to replay events after some time, assuming your data is still in the archive. And as I said, in the NiFi configuration, you have many properties to specify how large the archiving should be and for how long you should keep data around, depending on your use cases and requirements. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. Yes, 10 minutes left. So any question at this point? Because I can keep talking about many things. I'm going to, like, for 5 minutes maybe, talk a bit about monitoring in NiFi. But before I jump into this, do you have any questions on any topic, really? Not necessarily what I just been talking about. Just to very quickly on the record stuff. Using the record processors and the record API is making a drastic change in terms of NiFi performances. This is a huge difference. So anytime I'm talking to a user of NiFi, I'm saying, when you have a NiFi flow, your NiFi flow should use record processors. This should be the standard going forward for any NiFi flow that you are building. It should leverage the record processors. If you do think that, assuming you are dealing with a structured data, data on which you can apply a schema. If you are dealing with images, forget about what I said. But if you are able to apply a schema on top of your data, record processors should be used for all of your flows. If you feel like you have a use case that you are dealing with where record processors cannot be used, feel free to reach out, Twitter, email, GitHub, whatever. I would love to know more about your use case and how we can fix this, because record processors are really making a huge difference in how you can much more efficiently process your data and manage your data. Okay, I pause for 30 seconds. If you have questions, please. Otherwise, I will talk a bit about monitoring. No questions. Okay, then feel free to, there is a question. Thanks. Yeah. I saw it. Thank you. So is NiFi mature enough as a tool to be used in production with minimal intervention? From my understanding, it appears that NiFi does require some level of human intervention and might be better suited as maybe an internal tool. Well, NiFi is used in production for very critical use cases across many industries and so on. And when I say very critical, I mean very critical use cases. For example, we have banks that are using NiFi for dealing with the actual payment transactions. So when you are paying with your credit card, the approval that you are waiting on the machine where you put your credit card and you wait for payment approved, this is going through NiFi, assuming you are in the right country and using the right bank. But just to give you an example, NiFi is definitely dealing with very critical use cases in production. And we do have, just to answer your question about minimal intervention, we do have users that are completely locking out the UI of NiFi in production. Like no one has the permission to access the NiFi UI in production, even in read-only access. Everything you are doing here, all of the actions I'm doing on the NiFi UI can be done programmatically with APIs and so on. We provide also CLIs and so on. So everything I'm doing here and showing that you can deal with your flow while it's running and so on, because it's really nice in terms of operation. All of this you will do in dev or pre-prod environments. I fully agree with you. When you go to production, well, you probably don't want anyone just messing around with the flow. That's why we have this these levels of authorizations where you can say, well, in production, the only things you can do is start, stop, but you can't change the configuration. You can change anything. But again, if there are operations that you need to do in production, all of the operations you see here, all of the operations, okay, I lost my VPN. It's coming back. All of the operations you are doing on the NiFi UI can be completely automated via scripting, APIs, CLIs, and so on. So yes, to your question, NiFi has been around for almost 20 years now, and it's used in production in many places. So yes, it's definitely mature enough. Yes, for sure. I hope I answered your question. Maybe you meant, maybe your question was meant in a different way, but feel free to ask a follow-up question if it was not clear. But many use cases in production, I can, like if this is something of interest, I can talk a bit about the kind of use cases we see across our users and customers. Very quickly about monitoring. Feel free to hit questions in the chat if you want. We have 5 minutes left. Just want to mention a few things about monitoring. NiFi provides a lot of things directly in the UI in terms of monitoring. So we have this concept of status history, where you can see a bunch of metrics over time. You can see a lot of things. So you have a lot of information. Here, obviously, NiFi has not been doing a lot, so you won't see much things, but you can see how much processing it did, how much data it's processed, and so on. You also have status history at the node level, so how NiFi is performing in terms of resources consumption. So in terms of memory, in terms of loads. So you can see here NiFi is, well, pretty much doing nothing. It's very idle. Like in terms of IO's operation and so on. So NiFi is providing a lot of monitoring out of the box directly in the NiFi UI. But then if you want to externalize all of this into external systems, we have the concept of, and that's the last type of components, I would say. Well, it's not the last one, but the last one I will be talking about today. We have this concept of reporting task, which is a way for you to define, so basically those reporting tasks have access to all of the monitoring data within NiFi, and you can decide what to do with it. So for example, here we have a reporting task that is taking all of the lineage data that is generated with NiFi and sending it to Apache Atlas. We have some monitoring reporting tasks for checking the disk usage. So if we are getting close to disk saturation, we have some alerting in place, and we have a bunch of reporting tasks. One that is very commonly used is the Prometheus reporting task, which is a way to expose all of the data into Prometheus, and then you can have your own Grafana dashboards if you want. Query NiFi reporting task is allowing you to execute SQL queries on top of the monitoring data and export this into some destinations as well. So I just wanted to mention this because I know there are always a lot of questions about NiFi monitoring. Just because we don't have a lot of time left, there is my YouTube channel. So if you type my name on YouTube, you will find my channel fairly easily, hopefully. I'm posting videos about use cases. So I'm assuming that people listening are already familiar with NiFi, but feel free to have a look. And there is a video here. It's a 3 hours video where I'm going into great details about NiFi monitoring. So if this is a topic of interest, please have a look. Okay. I'm taking the question I see in the chat around error handling ever been a challenge. So, well, NiFi is a framework. So basically, error handling is part of the flow design. And many customers or users, I should say, of NiFi have different approaches in terms of how errors should be handled. We have some users, they have this dead letter queue approach, where the data that is in error is going to be sent to some destination for later reprocessing, specific reprocessing. Some users are going to rely on the replay capability that I was mentioning before. Some users, they actually don't really care about failures, and they are just going to drop the data that is not matching their requirements. That's something that some customers are doing. So there is no challenge really. I would say it depends on the use case and what are your requirements when it comes to failure. Should we be retrying? Should we be sending the data into a dedicated location for specific processing or for reprocessing the data later? All of this is like, you have many options when it comes to error handling. So there are best practices just to make sure that you are not accumulating a lot of data in NiFi that is in error. There are many ways to deal with this. For the use cases, well, I don't have the slide handy, but I can finish on this. In terms of the range of use cases we can see, as I said, it's across all industries, all verticals, and so on. Very common use cases are just about moving data from databases to databases, file systems to databases. Those are very straightforward use cases. Moving data between data centers, streaming use cases, NiFi and Kafka are really working well together. Logs collection is a very common use case for cybersecurity at scale. Yeah,
excuse me, Pierre. I'm really sorry to stop you, but yeah, it's time. So, I mean, if you have time, we can keep going. Pierre.
I do have time, so I can just finish on the use case question, and I will stop there. So just 1 more minute.
All right. Yeah, cool. Please carry on.
Yeah. So in terms of use cases, there is IoT related use cases, frauds detection use cases for financial institutions, getting data out of systems like Salesforce, whatever. Sending notifications to Slack messaging. Honestly, I mean, the range of use cases we see across our users is extremely large. You can NiFi is also used for some CDC use cases. You can think of, as soon as you have a use case where data is involved, you basically you can use NiFi. So it can be for also the, let's say, data engineering / data scientists world, especially with the things that we are working on with NiFi 2.0, where Python developers will have very nice ways to use NiFi. So for applying and doing some inference with machine learning models and so on, we will be providing some nice options. Very quickly, because I see another question. If templates are going to be removed, any alternative API to upload the flows to the NiFi canvas? Yes, as I said, and I can show you very quickly, anything you are doing on the UI, if you want to know what's the corresponding APIs, you can open the developer tools and just do the operation that you want to do to get the corresponding APIs. Otherwise, you can also go into, here you can go into help, which will open the documentation, and you have the REST API here. And if you go into process group, you will see the API to create a process group from a JSON file. I don't remember where it is exactly, but that's where you will find it. So that's how you can find the information. Feel free to reach out if you don't find the information, but basically, my best recommendation is open the developer tool, just do the operation on the UI, and you will get the exact APIs that are called. Everything that you are doing in the NiFi UI is API calls. That's why anything you do can be scripted and automated with APIs. I will stop here because otherwise we will keep talking for hours. So thanks everyone for joining this call. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have follow-up questions or things that were not clear. Like always happy to talk about NiFi. So feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions or things you would like to discuss, and always available for another meetup in the future if there are topics you would like to discuss.
Thank you very much, Pierre. That was a fantastic presentation. You went into depth, starting from the beginning all the way up to use cases and whatnot. And also you touched up on how to become a contributor and a committer. So I think that's a huge hurdle for anyone who wants to become an open source contributor. So that was great. Thank you for shedding some light on this. So for the participants, Pierre is, as you can see, he's on almost all social media handles there. On top of this, we will be publishing a blog. Hopefully Pierre can write us one. And the YouTube video, I mean, this particular meeting is being recorded, and a link to that will be posted in our YouTube channel and probably in Pierre's YouTube channel. And all of those will be in our Medium blog posts. And we will publish it in the meetup page as well as in our LinkedIn posts. So please keep an eye on that. And looking forward to seeing you all in the next meetup. And Pierre, let's get together and work on the next NiFi meetup. People want to learn more from you. It's very obvious.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.